Hello, everyone. Welcome to another performance of United We Stand, Music to Connect Us, a virtual concert series from the U.S. Army band Pershing Zone. I'm Chief Warrant Officer 2 James Landrum, and I am here now with Staff Sergeant Joshua Kauffman, trumpet player with the U.S. Army Blues. And Sergeant Kauffman, first of all, tell us a little bit about that first tune that we heard from you guys.
So the first song we played was recorded in 1928 with Louis Armstrong and his Hot Five, and it was entitled West End Blues. And in my opinion, I wanted to start the program off with that because that is one of, if not the most important recording Louis ever made. Beginning with the cadenza at the top, going into his real lavish solo at the end. He was doing things that were far advanced any other trumpet player and any other musician really during his time. He sort of set the standard in early jazz for rhythmic content, harmonic content. I mean, he was really ahead of his time.
And so obviously you're a student of his music, and you've been, studying and listening and practicing it for a long time. So what is one of your favorite Armstrong solos?
My favorite solo he ever recorded is a tune called Jubilee that he recorded 10 years later after West End Blues in 1938 in Los Angeles with his orchestra. He also recorded Jubilee in a 1937 film. It was a Mae West film entitled Every Day's a Holiday. And the most amazing thing about that solo is his patience with regards to sort of like he just always had this melodic approach to soloing, and then he just keeps going, and on the trumpet end, he ends on this big, wide open high G at the end of the recording. And, for us mere mortals, it's just a very difficult solo to play, to say the least.
And so the thing that I have to ask you, mere mortal, is can you play us a few notes of this?
Sure. So he starts out like this. Plays that by the time I'm already tired. And then he goes. I think he's playing high enough, and then he goes. And he plays lines like that at the end. I can hear him singing that and scatting and just having this huge grin on his face. How can you not be happy listening to this music?
Well, you make it look easy, so thank you. Great job.
Thanks, Chief.
I'm here with Sergeant First Class Regan Brough, bass player with the Army Blues, and Sergeant First Class Michael Kramer, guitar with the Army Blues. And Sergeant Brough, let me start with you. So today you're playing in a small group rhythm section environment, whereas normally you're driving an entire big band. What are some of those differences that you're concerned about when you're playing in a small group versus playing in a large ensemble like the big band?
Well, as a bass player, your primary roles don't change. I'm still responsible for providing solid harmonic as well as rhythmic bass, no pun intended. So that's a big part of my job no matter the size of the group. One thing that's different, today when we play Mahogany Stomp, like Pops Foster did on the original recording, he used the bow. They would also do a lot of other things like snapping the strings, which I didn't do today. But those are some of the ways that it's slightly different, but my role remains the same, where I'm still part of driving an ensemble no matter the size.
Any particular challenges in one style versus the other?
I think the challenges are roughly the same. It's providing that strong foundation that's really all important. Okay.
And Sergeant Kramer, so we saw you playing the banjo throughout this performance today, and why that choice? Is it a historical authenticity thing? Normally we see the banjo being used in bluegrass and some more traditional folk settings. Why that instrument?
It's a great question, Chief. Exactly, it's a historical reference to the original Louis Armstrong recordings, the Hot 5 recordings. There was the banjo player who actually was a converted guitar player. His name was Johnny St. Cyr. So we're going to match the original texture of those recordings, which is why we made that choice.
Have you been playing the banjo as long as you've been playing the guitar?
No, I haven't, Chief. I actually started playing the banjo in this trad jazz style while I was in college. There was an educator separate from the college, but his name is Dave Robinson, and he's still working with the group. That's a student group, but it's also they play professional gigs in this style. And my college days are about 10 years ago, I guess, so that's about how long it's been.
Great. Thanks, gentlemen. I'm here now with Staff Sergeant Aaron Eckert, trombone for the Army Blues, and Sergeant Major Scott Weinhold, who is senior producer for the U.S. Army Band Pershing Zone. And Sergeant Major, let's start with you. So quickly tell us a little bit about your role as senior producer. What does that entail?
So as senior producer, my job is to coordinate logistics and planning for all of our major events. The largest being our annual holiday show at DAR Constitution Hall, or 1812 on the field, or we used to do it at the National Mall.
And obviously you've been a woodwind player for most of your life. What's it like stepping out of that support role that you've normally been doing recently and coming out on stage and playing with these guys today?
So the first word that comes to mind is refreshing. I started my career as a musician in the band as a saxophonist, and was primarily a musician in the band for 15 years before I took over as senior producer. So it was a real treat to be able to play with such great young musicians. And so it was a treat. It was a little bit of a challenge because, of course, I'm out here on stage thinking about all of the things I have to think about as a producer when it comes to lighting and staging and how does this look. So I tried to detach a little bit and just focus on music this morning, and then go turn back on my phones to see what else is on my plate.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so Sergeant Eckert, normally playing in the trombone section for the Blues, and you've got that great section sound, but I can't help but notice today your lines are very exposed when you're up here with just the three horn players. So what's that like? What is your role in this Louis Armstrong Hot 5, Hot 7 style ensemble?
Well, you said it, Chief. Everyone has a role. The trumpet normally takes the melody. The clarinet is arpeggiating lines over the top of that. And the trombone is providing more of a harmonic foundation, playing guide tone lines, also some roots here and there. And with all of those roles that are prescribed, we know when to play and hopefully not step on each other's toes.
So is that a tricky balance that you sometimes have to achieve? A lot of active listening in a situation like this?
Absolutely, especially if you're playing with people that you don't normally play with, or in settings that you're not as used to. It takes a while to get used to how other people react and how other people play.
Excellent. Well, I'm loving the performance, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm back again with Staff Sergeant Josh Kauffman, and I have to ask you, I mean, it's obvious watching this performance how invested you are, how much you enjoy this music. Why is the music of Louis Armstrong so important to you?
Well, Chief, I really enjoy his music because it tells a story. You know, Louis obviously started in the 1920s with jazz in New Orleans, and then eventually in Chicago and onward. This music really, to me, is the heartbeat of America. You know, jazz is America's only original art form. And throughout his whole career, Louis was so invested in spreading the love of jazz, and he was compassionate towards others. And I just enjoyed that storytelling aspect. He wasn't just playing music for music's sake. He was trying to have his audience be touched and leave better off than on their way into the theater or wherever they were to hear him play.
So you mentioned earlier he was making music, you know, during the 1930s, which was Depression-era America, and you know, the culture of the country, the historical context. Everybody was just going through so much trial, so much effort, and seemed like they were finding some solace maybe in the music that he and his contemporaries were making. Do you see any parallels between what he was doing at that time and what you guys are doing for America today in the midst of this pandemic we're all dealing with?
Absolutely. That was the reason why I decided to choose this program. I wanted to be able to contribute somehow musically to people, especially when we're all feeling so far apart, and it's just so great to make music with my colleagues here. I decided to choose this music because if you look over Louis Armstrong's life, his entire life he was giving and helping people. You mentioned the Great Depression. Obviously, people were burning their own records to keep themselves warm, but they were still going and willing to pay to hear live entertainment and live music, and he made a lot of advances in his career during that time. But during that period, he was playing for people, and people wanted to hear him, and he was trying to, like I said earlier, allow his audience to leave better off. And then during the Second World War, he recorded on V-discs, which were recordings released by the U.S. War Department for troops, for, you know, boosting morale and just giving them a piece of home. He contributed to those recordings. And then even later in life, he actually became an ambassador for the U.S. State Department. And my favorite story when he went on a 3-month stint tour in Africa is he went to the Congo, and they were experiencing a civil war at the time. And the two sides agreed on a 1-day ceasefire so that they could all hear Louis Armstrong. And so his claim to fame was that always he ended the Civil War. But if you look from sort of start to finish of his life, he always had this sort of optimistic feeling when playing. You can't help but watch a video of him or hear a recording and just smile ear to ear. You know, when I hear Jubilee, it just totally makes my day.
So both then and now, the point of all this music is to connect people.
Absolutely. This music tells a story, and that we will all be able to overcome whatever we are facing. And I just hope that the music that people are hearing today from this group will inspire patriotism and optimism and allow us to overcome what we are experiencing, because we can all get through it together. We've seen many other things that music has brought us through.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and thank you very much for joining us today. On behalf of our leader and commander, Colonel Andrew Esch, thank you for joining us for another edition of United We Stand Music to Connect Us, this virtual concert series. Stay tuned to our Facebook page for future performances, and we have one more tune for you.